Going to bring an example, but I ate it before this meeting. I just couldn't help myself. One thing that really attracts me to a product is bright, fun packaging. Makes me feel nostalgic. Really love purpose-driven brands or like mission-driven brands. So one of my favorite products is called Tony's Chocolate. Has anyone had that before?
No,
absolutely.
Oh my gosh. I love Tony's Chocolate. It really reminds me of like a Wonka bar a little bit with the bright colored packaging and their font. So that nostalgia kind of hits me a bit. They have a really great purpose driven where they work to end the exploitation in the cocoa world. And so I think that's really great. Their packaging stands out. The whole story of what they're doing and how they help is on there. So for me, I'm always drawn to Tony's Chocolate and it's delicious. So try it.
It's interesting because I know Tony's Chocolate well. My daughter introduced me to it because it's really big in Europe. It's a great example. I'm just going to add a little bit more to that. Yes, I'm driven to values, but what I really find with Tony's, it's super clear what the product is. There's clarity of their values, the importance, but it's big, bold, bright, and in no way am I ever doubting that my understanding that this is a big chocolate bar. Point of that, if we were to talk about different packaging, sometimes when we're thinking about packaging and products, and I've heard this from grocers themselves, is that some food businesses are being so creative with their packaging and design that we don't know what the product is. And if I was to give another example, and I'll do a shout out to our client, Doug, operations manager with Natural Pastures, has always said, let's make sure it's really clear what kind of cheese this is. That to him was number one. And he pushed on that, if you remember, Sheena, years ago. And just clarity of what the product is and the type of product. Because if I'm shopping in a grocery store, my biggest thing is I don't want to spend too much time in that grocery store. So when I have to figure out who's doing what, if they're not clear, I move on. Or I miss it.
I do the same because I'm like super drawn to like bold colors and fun designs, and I love as Chaz well knows, I love a good pun. But especially if I'm going for products I've never tried before or something new, if the packaging catches my eye and I pick it up, that's great. But if I have to spend time figuring out what it is or what I'm going to use it for, or how I'm going to use it, there's no way I'm going to spend money testing something out. I'm not a shopper, so I'm a get in and get out kind of gal. I have to work to figure that out. I'm not bothering.
I think people judge products tremendously by their packaging, and I've seen some products out there that are great and really well made, but the packaging doesn't convey that, and so a great product, but it gets ignored because there's another one beside it that has like a more professional look, has more of a statement, and so I think that you don't have to spend a tremendous amount of money on packaging like some places do, but if your packaging looks like homemade and not a lot of attention was put to it, people will translate that to what's inside. So even if it's a small budget you have, I think that your packaging is basically people's first impression of you. So you got to make sure it says what you want it to say.
As a writer, I'm really attracted to clever names, and certainly in the snack aisle, chocolate aisle, there's all kinds of competition there. But at the same time, a clever name doesn't necessarily mean a great product. I also have a dairy allergy, so I need to be specific. But then I get curious. Okay, so that sounds really cool, but then you got to make sure the ingredients are there. But also what captures my attention is a good story. And I realize not every type of packaging can include a big story, but just a particular type of popcorn I bought the other day had a great story. I'm like, okay, so I'm absorbed in here and I'm going to try it.
Well, just to that degree too, because space is a huge issue, and we know that from our design side, especially when you have to include regulatory information. Like, a lot of space can be taken up by stuff that doesn't matter on a visual aspect, or doesn't hit on that visual spot. A lot of people just kind of, you flow over it visually. But I think if you don't have the space for the text story of it, if you're intentional about your graphics and your design, and that can tell a visual story.
100%. And if you can get that person to actually, I'm interested, so I'm going to hit their website, because there's a whole lot of people do that on their phone as they're, okay, do I care about this company? And you can find out, then you've had 2 hits on the brand. And that, there's that, the key of 5, of getting 5 interactions with your brand brings a level of loyalty, whatever that is. And so if you can get that and that background story, and then I'll just run on that, is that we know this from working with companies in wine, is many times the backstory on wine, or the design of the label, is more, well, it's not might, is more likely to affect the purchase of that product than what's actually in the bottle. So when you have a good design and a good story, as I turn it around, and that's what that sector brought to food products, because people care, they want to know the story. And we have all these food businesses with these wonderful values, and more times than not, they're trying to do something right or do something good for the world. Does that come through? And I'll just say the last thing to what you mentioned, Tammy. I'll just kind of, for a lot of folks, it's really important, I think, is that they're not trying to look sophisticated, or not trying to look like what they're not. Sometimes looking homemade, to me, it's about being authentic. Don't look sophisticated if you're presenting, down home popcorn, for lack of a better way to put it. Like, look like who you are, be authentic. That, if it's not, you're breaking the brand.
I agree with that. And what I was trying to convey is the quality, not the style. If you're a product that's meant for family cooking, then absolutely you should have a style that matches. That's homespun, kind of good quality country. If it's something fun like chocolate, yes, have funny names and stuff like that, because it's used as a celebration. That you should really, when you design packaging, think of what you want the consumer to feel about it, and that's what your packaging should match. I wanted to comment on something you said earlier about how packaging can change a product's success. There's a really famous example of being Blasted Church wine, and the original owners could not sell the wine. Got a company to redesign the label. They did a lot about the community pride and the history of the Blasted Church. When it was launched, that wine could not even stay on the shelves. It was so popular. Exact same wine, just different packaging.
It's good wine too, by the way.
Yes, it just had a bad label, so nobody picked it up.
I'm a very different shopper, I guess. So one thing that's been driving me nuts packaging wise recently is how horrible health food is for the environment. It's just been driving me increasingly nuts. I mean, I know that the plastic is supposedly recyclable more and more, but compliance on that is probably pretty low. So sometimes it's on me. I'll buy a little one serving of something, but especially if I buy a bag of things full of like 12 individually wrapped things, and I'm sure some parents probably love that, and I appreciate that. But that mishmash of values and packaging, I find a lot. And sometimes the because I'll get in there and calculate like the cost of a small pack versus a large pack, and there's many times where like the $5 the $20 version is exactly 4 times the $5 version. Like, there's no savings in going larger. I'm finding more and more in some products, which drives me a little bonkers. It's kind of like, I know it's costing you 20% less, so I'd like a little bit of that. Some of those mismatches are those hit on me a little bit. I think Tony's, who is it? Chaz that brought up Tony's. I haven't bought one yet. I've been kind of on the fence for so long because it's made in Belgium or something, and it's kind of like if I want to buy the import. But that kind of it feels a bit saturated. I was trying to reflect on what has stood out for me recently as like, wow, that's neat packaging. I have seen, like, on the topic of nice packaging, custom etched bottles or certain things that have like the logo etched into the bottom of a glass kombucha bottle or something, which I know, means they bought 100,000 bottles and then paid an arm and a leg for them. But sometimes those little, just the cap not being the default plastic and just certain things like that do go a long way. So seeing like $15 jars of pickles that aren't organic and are just a mason jar with the label slapped on them, and I'm kind of going, how did you convince anyone to buy this into the store? So it's
I think what you brought up is really important too, because if you are conveying and you're following a theme on, whether it's organics or you're professing strong values, environment and protection of that. I know for myself, if I look at packaging and it isn't in line with the promise, it makes me question the product as a whole. However you're being driven on that particular product, to me, that's authenticity. You need to follow through on that and execute on that. We've had some clients that even were very transparent in saying, because of the kind of product we have, packaging is a challenge. And so they've written on that on the website, or even noted that on the product itself, to say this is a challenge, but we're on a journey and we're going to look to solve it. And then, so they keep me. But if they don't have that, the brand's kind of broken, and, oh, geez, this is supposed to be good for me and good for the earth. Yet I'm looking at all this packaging and I'm of the demographic that psychographic that cares about that.
Yeah.
This has got to work. Yeah.
It's frustrating that there's limited availability of sustainable packaging, and it tends to be more expensive. So a lot of these companies could have the biggest heart, but actually can't afford to do the proper packaging.
That is a challenging space. And David and I have been in those conversations with small food businesses, because it's very hard, because how many they order and the cost per unit and all of those things, it's difficult to follow the values of that, how you want to position the business or product. It's a challenging space, that.
I don't know if there's any way around it with just the current individual packaged culture. It feels like a kind of stuck point. That, I only have vague memories of the 80s and 90s, but there was definitely a lot less, mini wrapped treats and that being purchased. It seems like just the fact that individual serving sizes being the norm feels like it forces difficult packaging decisions. The beverage industry seems to have really shifted to aluminum, with the whole, like, this is completely recyclable and compliance is really good on it, which seems like a positive shift. But for anything wrapped, feels like, I don't know what the next step is, other than shifting away from mini packages or going back to bulk or something, which is a whole different arena. When my travels last year, I was at a market where they had bulk, like, cookies and things like that, and chips, that you would just go and just grab a handful of cookies instead of buying a bag. So that was fun.
Is it a no frills or whatever in town, which is here, where you bring your own packaging and then you just fill up bulk materials. So it's actually like branding and packaging and design has like zero influence there. It's really all down to the product.
I would argue that's still branding and marketing. It's not what we're talking about here today, but you're after a certain target audience. I'm looking at, David, when the dispensaries, and we have one here in town where you take whatever it is and you get your soaps, or you get whatever, and it could be food items or whatever, but it's targeting a specific type of psychographic consumer, that these things are important. And it isn't just about cost. In fact, I might argue that we spend a little bit more on what we're doing to be good to the earth. That positioning, name, and other things are going to be important to you. I'm just going to say, while we're on it, just for me, we do creative design. We're helping people with the packaging, but I still am, and this is kind of what Sheena and I were both saying, that when we go into the grocery store, make it easy for me to pick this up or to understand it. And that is, make sure you look like your product and packaging looks like the sector you're in. I've had folks make some odd choices with colors, and sometimes that's where you want to work with, not to promote us too much here on this, but having designers that understand those things. So I think we talked about this a few weeks back, is that there are shades of green that just somehow do not say buy this cheese, but you use because it almost looks like the cheese is curdled by the variation of lime green, but you pick the right green and it's like, oh, that looks spring-like and good, and it adds to the freshness. So you have to make the right choices. That I understand the sector, and that includes, color choices, design. Small food always tries to put too much on the label. Less is more. That's the old adage that I've been in marketing for many years, and less is more is always in there. But please, I'm an old guy. If I can't read your label and can understand what the product is, I'm going to pick something else because I'm an impatient old guy.
You have to really look at what your target audience is looking for and wants. We've had a few clients in the past that were so passionate about their own personal style and their own personal ideas. And as you know, we're trying to tell them that's a disconnect from say, the busy moms that you think is your main target audience. So it's important to do a bit of research before designing your
who's your target, and what are their pain points? What benefits are they really looking for?
Yeah, and how do you fulfill them?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say for small businesses, more times than not, they can't afford the packaging they really want. To David's point on, it relates in there. So how do you design labels or work with it that compensates, that allows for that? And that's where not spending more money, being smart about how you do this. I think that's the key.